Funky Friday is a video game I've played since 2021, and I am not a fan of it anymore. Yes, I won't be saying nice things to this extremely popular rhythm button presser. No, I'm not hating on it because it's popular. I have my own reasons to dislike the game. And this isn't a personal attack on anyone that actually does play Funky Friday. I can understand people liking it because it has proper mobile support, apparently. Another thing to note is that this is mostly a filler thing before I actually push out a proper video, so if the editing is extremely lackluster, don't act surprised. Let's have a small history lesson, shall we? If I do get something wrong, you are entirely free to yell at me in the comments. Anyway, so back in 2021, when I haven't actually learned how to create videos, basically FNF was a thing. It had a decent amount of players and was complete and utter garbage. Since most of everyone at the time weren't amazing at FNF or rhythm games in general, barely anyone noticed. And a little bit later down the line, around say a couple of months, Funky Friday was released, and everyone who did really like basically FNF flocked straight to Funky Friday. At the time, the input system and the fact that there were different animations were significant improvements and was never seen before. The input system was, and still is, heavily based on Quaver instead of FNFs though. But it doesn't really matter, half of us were just happy with a funny beep boop game and we looked cool doing it. Skipping ahead a few months, Funky Friday was now the biggest FNF game on Roblox, and to those that actually spent a lot of time on the game started seeing issues, most notably me. It was around the time when Tricky 2.0 was released and problems started popping up. I will get into detail as to why there were problems, but it's mostly on the input system. Around the same time, the input system was quote-unquote revamped, but it wasn't really revamped, it just made notes slower and six were a little bit harder to land. While this isn't exactly an issue on the long run, with how most players are super experienced now with hitting 6, it was an extremely noticeable change at the time. And around that same time, Bloxen was actually released, being a really poor man's imitation of Funky at the time. Yeah, during that time, there were several other games outside of Bloxen that had cool gimmicks, most notably Mic Drop, Lemon Funkin', now called Lemon Funky, and Yet Another Funkin' Night. Obviously, at the time, Yet Another Funkin' Night was the absolute peak on how you actually handled a proper FNF input system without it feeling loose. And it also was around the time where I started to stop playing Funky and played everything else. A little bit further down the line, Yafin was killed off, I revisited Bloxen. It was honestly amazing at the time. I was just completely blown away with how Bloxen handled things and how it constantly kept improving upon itself. And I checked out Funky Friday after I haven't played it for like 4 months. It was super disappointing. So, what's the good thing about Funky Friday again?
Subscribe. Drag tile!
Apparently, one of the main reasons why people still play Funky Friday to this day is that it has decent mobile support. Well, at least one aspect of it, I think. Since I actually don't play on mobile, I wouldn't know. So I will let Mr. Dead Pokatuber over there describe it.
In my opinion, the only thing about Funky fucking Friday is the fact that drag tiles are included. Drag tiles make mobile gameplay easier, being able to, as the name suggests, drag your finger to the next tile to the one you're holding down. Another thing that I found alright, that the game's mobile support is overall alright. Everything else, however, is absolutely atrocious, bro. So atrocious that the Joker cringed. So atrocious that Jelly Bean seemed good. I'm joking.
Another thing that's pretty neat is proper arrow customization. I wouldn't go too deep into this cause wow, screw trying to get footage of that. But it is extremely customizable and other people can see what arrows you've made. On the flip side, obviously its input system is a bit of an issue. Not only is it extremely outdated and has barely received changes since day one, it is extremely unoptimized. Hitting notes is extremely loose and doesn't actually feel like you've hit a note unless you had hit sounds on. Also, it absolutely loves to read inputs incorrectly. And take a look here. Look at how much it lags whenever I hit an input. And put the same song on Bloxen for a side-by-side comparison running at a smooth frame rate. Keep in mind I haven't actually touched any of the graphical settings on either game. If you're extremely lucky, you can get the game to run above 30 frames a second before it decides to take a fat dump and drop to a couple frames. Let's talk about all the other stuff that's done poorly. The animations aren't anywhere near the level of every other current semi-decent FNF game out there. It's super apparent on the older animations that they refuse to update, and this speaks for itself. Going off that, let's talk about the rigs, which look terrible, inaccurate, and they're animated extremely poorly. So poorly, in fact, that I don't even want to record more than a minute of it. Also, they're a fucking fortune to get to, so good luck farming points for those. So if you aren't an iPad kid that doesn't know any better, play Bloxen!